Hi, I'm Rachel New, dating and relationships coach in London, and I'm here with Richard Baffoe of The Single Boss, which organises events for singles in London. And we're here for part 2 of our conversation about what makes a good conversation when you meet new people. So in this part, we're going to be demonstrating some of the key elements of a good conversation. I guess there's quite a lot of levels that the conversation is going on at. So you've got the factual stuff, and what you've got in common. But this other level going on beneath that, which is what is it that's making me feel comfortable or uncomfortable in this conversation? What's making me feel energized? What's making me feel understood and heard? And those things are very, very subtle, and they're not really to do with the topics. They're to do with kind of skills that we may or may not have learned from a very young age. But sometimes people can be missing a key skill in this area that they might not realize. And often the people that I work with will say, please be honest with me, tell me, what am I doing wrong? And a lot of the time it's some very simple things, which we're going to demonstrate now, I think, with some little role players, some little scenarios where we're going to spontaneously have some conversations, and we're going to leave out some of these key skills, and we're going to see, and then you can, if you're watching this video, you can then pause it and see if you can notice what those things are. And when I've done this before with people, they've noticed the effect of it. So they've noticed that they're not feeling so good, but they don't know why, because these things are so kind of implicit, they're so nuanced and subtle, that we might not even realize what they are. So if we can make them explicit, then we can learn to do them. So scenario number 1, viewers, can you try and spot how you feel in the conversation and what you think might be missing?
So what brings you around here?
I was working in town today and I saw this advertised online, and I thought I'd pop along, see what it was like, meet some new people. Not done it before, but I thought I'd give it a try.
Okay. Yeah, that's nice. You got anything you want to ask me?
Yeah, so what brings you along today?
I saw the event. I thought, yeah, let me just pop along before I go home.
And cut. End of scenario 1. So I wonder what you think was going on there. And I think we both were practicing the same skill, actually. So the 2 things that were missing there, do you want to say what they were, Richard?
So eye contact.
So there was no eye contact.
Yeah, and a back and forth, the feedback from each other's conversations.
Yeah, so normally in a good conversation, both people help the flow of the conversation along by interjecting with little words like and okay and right and nodding their head, or just little meaningless kind of sounds that will help the other person to feel like the other person's actually listening and hasn't given up. Like if you're on the telephone, when it all goes quiet and you don't know if the other person's still there. So did you get that sense that Richard was not really interested in the conversation? He wasn't emotionally involved in the conversation, or he had no feelings about the conversation? That might be one effect that you had, or you might have had some thoughts going through your mind. Am I being really, I guess this is the kind of thoughts that I could have had while I was talking, is, am I really boring him because he's not responding? Am I offending him? Am I not answering the question? Or is he just not interested at all in me? Or maybe he just doesn't have any emotions at all. So those are some of the thoughts that would go through my mind if somebody didn't do those little interjections. So we're going to do the conversation again, and we're going to put those things back in. But just to point out that Richard, then it all went quiet. So I also showed a bad conversation skill there, because I answered the question, but really I should then ask the same question back. That's a kind of really basic ingredient of a conversation, is whatever the person asks you, ask the question back, because clearly they're interested in that question, otherwise they wouldn't have asked you it. And it's a nice easy starting off question, isn't it, when you get talking to somebody? So definitely ask the same question back. Don't wait for them to prompt you. And then I also at the end went all quiet and didn't say anything in response to what he said, and there was a bit of an awkward silence, which is not good for a conversation. So yeah, you can just practice some little platitudes like, oh, that's really interesting, or oh, I'm glad you came along, or oh, thank you for sharing that, or something like that, or just okay, like that. Nothing complicated. Okay, so scenario 1B, the correct version of the previous scenario.
Hi, so what brings you here today?
Oh, so I was working in town today and I had a look online to see what was on this evening and spotted this event. So I thought I'd come along. It's my first time. Thought it'd be nice to meet some new people.
Oh, that's really cool. I am exactly the same. I was a
Okay.
little bit nervous about coming, but I saw the event and I thought, oh, let me come along and meet some
Yeah.
people.
Oh, that's great. So that's just an example. Did you notice I said, okay, that's interesting, that's great. And Richard, he didn't even wait for me to ask him why he was here. He jumped straight in with telling me while he was here. So there was a good response. There was no awkward pause in that situation. So I'm really feeling welcome to the event. Okay, so this is scenario 2, and I'm going to demonstrate a lacking feature in a conversation. See if you can spot what is missing.
So tell me, what do you do?
So I'm a dating and relationships coach. I run workshops and consultations, and sometimes I do events. How about you?
I'm an events manager. I run events for corporates. I do that in London. And that's pretty cool work.
Okay, so you run corporate events.
Yeah.
End of conversation. So now we will redo it with the feature put back in, and then we will tell you what the feature was. So if you want to pause and make any notes on what you think was missing from the conversation, you can do that. Okay, so this is the scenario 2B, done correctly.
So tell me, what do you do?
So I'm a dating and relationships coach, and I run workshops online and in person, and I do consultations on a one-to-one. Sometimes I do in-person events in London. How about you?
That's great. I'm an events manager. I run events as well for corporate.
Wow, you run events as well. Just so cool. Amazing.
Really interesting.
So what's the best thing about running events for you?
I think it's just seeing people come in and really enjoy themselves. And I love hospitality. I love catering for people.
Cool. Okay, end of scenario. So what was it that was missing and what did I put back in? Hopefully you spotted that I was very enthusiastic when I found out that we actually had something in common with our jobs. So the first time I just said, okay, and nothing else. No excitement, no acknowledgement of the fact that we've got this overlap. The second time, maybe I went a bit over the top, I don't know. But I always find it exciting when I've got something in common with somebody else, and I like to celebrate that. So it's good if you can be enthusiastic, your eyes can light up, you can just say something like, oh, wow, that's great. You don't have to, be super enthusiastic like me, but you can at least acknowledge that and try and build on it and use that as a way to connect with the other person. So that I then built on it by asking him, what is it that you like most about running events? And then hopefully he would ask me the same question back, or I can say, yeah, I really like that too. It's so motivating, or whatever. So anything you can build on, you're using the conversation as a vehicle to build connection. So you don't have to always give a fully comprehensive answer to every question that you're asked. It's not an information service. It's about using the conversation to build connection. Okay, so we are on to scenario 3A, and Richard is going to demonstrate an ingredient of a conversation that has a certain effect, and see if you can spot it.
So what do you find challenging about doing events?
So I really love doing events, and I love socializing and talking to people at the events, and it really energizes me to to make connections with people. But then my problem is that afterwards I take a long time to wind down. So if an event finishes at, say, 10 o'clock, then I can't go to sleep for probably the whole night, because I'm going over and over the conversation, and I'm just on such a high because I just love it so much.
Oh, have you ever tried ginseng capsules? They really get me setting at the end of an evening, a really busy evening. Have you ever tried any homeopathic remedies?
And cut. So now we're going to do the conversation again. Richard is going to do it differently, and you can see if we can spot what's different.
So what do you find challenging about doing these events?
So I love socializing with people and networking and having really good conversations with people. But my problem is that afterwards, I find it really hard to wind down because I'm on such a high. I've enjoyed it so much. I'm so excited that I just, can't sleep, basically.
I get that too. I find talking to people a lot during the event can take a lot out. So yeah, I like to unwind at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay, so what was going on there? The first time, Richard, what were you doing?
So I was offering solutions to a problem that may not even exist, and generally putting in a bit of an earful as well.
So what do you think I was looking for, and what was the purpose of me sharing that information with you about what I found difficult? Do you think?
Empathy, really. Empathy and understanding.
Empathy and understanding, exactly, yeah. And so the second time, you showed that you shared my reality, had a shared experience with me. You also found it difficult. And it's funny because even though we're just acting these conversations out, I actually did feel supported. I did feel like you understood me. So our bodies will respond to that tone of voice, to that feeling of being heard, even if it's not true. And so it's quite interesting with couples sometimes that I work with. I can, help them to train themselves to say these, what I call sympathy scripts. Sympathy, not solutions, is the catchphrase that I like to use, although I guess it's really empathy. But they feel like it's really forced and really contrived, but the other person still benefits. And eventually, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. So, every time I have these kind of conversations with clients, I actually find myself being comforted or feeling understood in the conversation, even though they're just practicing. So it really does make a difference. So yeah, thank you. And I actually do believe that you probably do find it hard to wind down after an event. So either very good acting or very good empathy. So thank you, Richard. Okay, so we're going to move on to scenario 4. So scenario 4A, and this time I'm going to demonstrate something you shouldn't do in a conversation. So Richard, tell me about something that's gone wrong in one of your events.
Oh gosh, so there was a time when the screen just completely went blank when I was doing a PowerPoint presentation.
Oh my gosh, that happened to me too. It's so embarrassing, isn't it? I just didn't know what to do. My mind went blank. All these people were watching, and it's like they couldn't fix it, and they tried so many different things, and then I had to try and do the presentation without a PowerPoint. It was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
End of scenario. Okay, now we'll do it again, and I will not do what I just did. So Richard, have you had any nightmare scenarios in any of your events?
So yeah, there was a time when the screen went completely blank. It turned out someone had stepped on the remote by accident, but able to get it sorted. It just felt really embarrassing because I didn't know what was going on.
Wow, what a nightmare. Okay, so the first time I was interrupting with my own story and didn't let Richard finish his story, took over the conversation. Obviously, it was nice and beneficial for me because I got to rant and rave about my experience. And also, I was clearly feeling good about the fact we'd shared this experience, but it wasn't good for Richard. I should let him finish his story. And at the end, I could maybe say one sentence to oh, that happened to me too. And if he wants to know more, he can ask me, but he doesn't need to know the whole story. Just the fact that we have a shared experience is enough. So don't tell your own stories. Maybe one sentence at the end of their story is enough. And the same, applies to in coaching and therapy. The therapist or the coach shouldn't jump in with their own stories, but it is good to show, if you do understand the experience with one sentence. And then the second time, did you notice I did all the ums and the okays and the little interjections to make him feel? What did you feel, Richard, when I did those things?
I felt understood. I felt like you're listening. I felt like you got it.
Like I got what a nightmare it was, yeah. So yeah, it's like you have to make the ums and the okays fit the tone of the conversation. So he's telling a nightmare scenario, so my tone of voice would be slightly different from if he was telling me that he'd suffered a bereavement. Then my tone of voice would be a little bit different. So you have to adjust your tone of voice for the conversation. Okay, so we're now moving on to another scenario, and Rachel is going to demonstrate the lack of a key ingredient in a conversation.
So, how's your week been?
So it's been good. I've been trying to make some videos, and I've been using this auto cue thing, where the words come up on the screen, so you can follow them and read them at the same time. But I thought I got the hang of it, but then it doesn't seem to work as it's supposed to. So I press play and then it doesn't start, and I'm all ready to go and it doesn't start over and over again, and it's driving me crazy.
So you must have felt out of your depth.
No, I didn't feel out of my depth. No, I feel pretty proud of myself actually for learning how to use it so quickly. I think what I felt was frustrated that there was something wrong with it, or it wasn't intuitive, or something was not very logical about the functions on the app.
I see.
Okay, we can cut that. So now we're going to do the conversation again, and Richard is going to show a better way to have the conversation. Hopefully you can see something that went wrong there. So, scenario again.
So, how's your week been?
Yeah, it's been good. I've been trying to make some videos. I've been using like an app that shows the words on the screen at a certain speed, so you can read them out, so keeping your eyes in the same place. But it's not really working properly. I press play and then nothing seems to happen.
So you've been learning to use the autocue. Okay. So that's been driving you crazy.
It has been driving me crazy, yes. Okay, and cut. So the first time, Richard was making assumptions about what I was feeling. He was extrapolating from what I said and thinking that I might be feeling out of my depth. Was that the word you used? Phrase
Yes.
that you used? Yes, which apart from being a bit patronizing, is also not what I was feeling. So sometimes we can project onto the other person what we think we might be feeling in that situation, but it might not be what the other person's feeling. So we have to be careful not to jump to conclusions, and we can ask them, how did that make you feel, rather than assuming. So I was feeling frustrated, but I was still feeling good about myself. My self-efficacy was high, but my frustration was also high. And then in the second scenario, Richard mirrored back to me the exact words that I used, which made me feel really good, made me feel really heard. So he said, so you've been using the autocue? And I said, yeah. And then he said, and it's been driving you crazy. And they were the exact words that I used. And although it might feel a bit contrived, did it feel contrived to say those exact words?
No, not at all.
Good. Okay. But sometimes when we first start mirroring, it can feel really false, but actually I felt really heard when you use those exact words. It's been driving me crazy. It's like he knows what I'm feeling. Maybe he doesn't, but he's pretending to. But by using the exact words back, you can just say, you're just asking for clarification. So it's driving you crazy. And that's all you need to say. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. But there's no paraphrasing, there's no extrapolation, no making of assumptions. You're just mirroring. And then if the person wants to go into more detail, then that gives them the opportunity to do that. So overall, we've gone through a lot of different skills. We've had, what did we start with? We started with eye contact and interjecting with ums and okays and yeses, and that's interesting. And the second skill we looked at was responding enthusiastically when the other person has something in common with us. So using that as a way to connect with the other person and building on that and asking more questions. So wow, that's brilliant, we've got that in common. Oh wow, I feel the same. Or yeah, I've read that book as well. And then we looked at offering advice and how we shouldn't offer advice unless the person specifically asks for it. Often they just want some empathy. And then the idea that we shouldn't tell our own story, shouldn't jump in and interrupt somebody and tell our own story. Even if we've got a very similar experience, they don't necessarily want to hear it, so let them finish their story. And then maybe just say one sentence to say that happened to me too. And if they want to hear more, they can ask you. And then finally, we practiced mirroring, where you use the exact words back to the other person. So you were feeling really frustrated, or so, it was raining when you went out for your walk or whatever, rather than paraphrasing and trying to draw conclusions that might not be warranted from the conversation. So thank you, Richard. That was really good.
Thank you.
And the sun is just coming out, so this is a good time to stop. I can't see a thing. So do you want to say anything about any future events that are coming up?
So yes, the Single Boss events usually held in central London, usually around the Oxford Circus area, and they're usually monthly. I will let Rachel know the details of the next events, and
I'll post a link to your website.
Yes.
in the information. Okay, well, thank you very much, Richard, and I hope anybody who's watching, hope you will be able to put your newfound skills into practice at a dating event soon. Do get in touch if you want any one-to-one support with your dating. Rachel New, datingcoach.co.uk.